Welcome to SMR Dreams, a place where we gently drift into the past so that you can fall asleep easily, calmly, and with a quiet sense of wonder. Settle in, get comfortable, and let your breathing slow. By the time this story reaches its end, you will already be drifting through peaceful dreams. Now, let us begin. Greek mythology is one of the most famous and enduring mythological traditions in human history. It was born more than 3,000 years ago, during the age of the Mycenaean civilization, and it continued to grow and evolve for centuries afterward. At first, these stories were not written down at all. They were whispered from mouth to mouth, passed gently from one generation to the next, like a quiet flame carried through time. Only later were they recorded by great poets such as Homer and Hesiod in the 7th and 6th centuries BCE. These ancient legends wove together real historical memories and fantastical visions, shaped by the vivid imagination of the Greek people. For the ancient Greeks, myths were never just fairy tales. They were a way of understanding the world. They explained where humans came from, why the sun rises every morning, how the stars appeared in the sky, and what might await the soul after death. Their gods were powerful beyond imagination, yet they were also deeply human. They loved and envied. They felt anger and tenderness, pride and sorrow. And perhaps that is why they felt so close to the people who worshiped them, because they reflected the same emotions that live quietly inside every human heart. Over time, Greek myths spread far beyond the borders of Greece. They inspired playwrights such as Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus, who transformed these ancient stories into tragic dramas that still move audiences today. They shaped Roman culture, and through Rome, they became part of the foundation of Western civilization itself. Even now, thousands of years later, their symbols and characters still surround us, in art, in literature, in the very way we tell stories about heroes and destiny. Why do these ancient tales still matter? Because they speak about things that never change: love and loss, fate and free will, great achievements, and terrible mistakes. Every Greek myth is a story about being human. Tonight, we will travel gently through these legendary stories, listening closely to what they still have to tell us. And our journey begins in ancient Athens, a city of wisdom, art, and unforgettable legends. One of the most fascinating figures in Greek mythology is Daedalus. Many people remember his name from childhood, but few realize how important he truly was. Daedalus was not just a craftsman. He was considered one of the greatest geniuses of the ancient world. His creations amazed ordinary people, and even the gods themselves. The word Daedalus in ancient Greek means skilled, clever, or ingenious, and it suited him perfectly. He was born in Athens and became famous for his inventions, sculptures, and buildings. It was said that the statues he created looked so real that people were afraid they might suddenly speak or move. Some legends even claim that his figures could turn their heads, lift their arms, and mimic human gestures through delicate mechanisms hidden inside wood, leather, and metal. People whispered that Daedalus had somehow breathed life into his creations, as if his talent itself were a kind of magic. But great talent often brings great danger. Daedalus had a nephew named Talos, a brilliant young inventor. Talos amazed everyone in Athens with his ideas. He invented the compass for drawing perfect circles, the saw inspired by the spine of a fish, and even the potter's wheel. The people of Athens praised him, and soon his fame began to rival that of his uncle. And in Daedalus' heart, admiration slowly turned into jealousy. Fear crept in, fear of losing his greatness. One terrible day, high above the city on the Acropolis, Daedalus pushed Talos from the cliff. The goddess Athena, however, saved the young man, transforming him into a partridge. But Daedalus was judged by the Athenian court and exiled forever. He left Athens in shame, traveling with his young son Icarus, the only family he had left. And it was this exile that would soon lead him to the dark and unforgettable secret of the island of Crete. The king chose to deceive the god. Instead of sacrificing the magnificent white bull, he offered Poseidon another, ordinary animal, hoping the god would not notice the substitution. But gods are not easily fooled, and Poseidon's anger rose like a dark storm across the sea. To punish Minos in the most humiliating and painful way, Poseidon turned to Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire. He asked her to place a terrible passion inside the heart of the king's wife, Queen Pasiphae. And so Aphrodite did. She filled Pasiphae with an uncontrollable longing for the very same white bull that Minos had spared. The queen could no longer sleep. She could no longer eat. Her thoughts were completely consumed by a desire that terrified her, yet would not let her go. In her desperation, Pasiphae turned to the greatest craftsman on the island, Daedalus. With shame and trembling fear, she begged him to help her fulfill this forbidden craving. Though horrified by the request, Daedalus had no choice. His life depended on the favor of the Cretan court. Using all his genius, he built a strange and unsettling device. A life-sized wooden cow, covered in real hide, so perfectly shaped that it looked alive. Pasiphae hid inside it, and from that unnatural union, a terrible fate was sealed. The ancient stories say that when this creature was conceived, the sky darkened, the sea grew restless, and the earth itself trembled, as if the world were warning humanity of what was to come. Pasiphae soon realized she was carrying a monstrous child. She was haunted by nightmares, visions of horns and shadows, and a future filled with sorrow. For months she hid from everyone, even from her closest servants. When the child was born, fear filled the palace. The newborn had the body of a human, but the head of a bull, wide nostrils, heavy horns, and dark, coarse hair. This was the Minotaur. King Minos was overwhelmed by shame and rage. He knew this creature was a living reminder of his own betrayal of the gods, and so he ordered Daedalus to create a prison from which no being could ever escape. Beneath the palace of Knossos, Daedalus built the labyrinth, a twisting, endless maze of corridors, dead ends, and secret paths. Even its creator struggled to find his way inside it. The Minotaur was dragged into its dark heart and left there forever, lost in shadows and echoing stone. To keep the labyrinth a secret, Minos ordered that all who helped build it be blinded and silenced. Only Daedalus was spared, but he and his son Icarus became prisoners on the island. Though surrounded by luxury, Daedalus felt only the ache of captivity, and Icarus, young and dreaming of the sky, suffered even more. So Daedalus looked upward to the birds, and from that quiet observation was born one of the most daring ideas in all of mythology. Those secret nighttime journeys were filled with constant tension and quiet fear. Daedalus would softly remind his son again and again to stay alert, to move gently, to never draw attention. Hour after hour, day after day, he carefully selected feathers, long ones, short ones, curved and light, sorting them with almost sacred patience so the wings would mirror the true shape of a bird's. Every tiny mistake could mean death. So Daedalus worked slowly, lovingly, combining nature's design with his own brilliant engineering, creating wings strong enough to carry two fragile human lives across the sky. When the two pairs were finally finished, he paused, feeling the deep symbolism of it all. The man who had built a labyrinth to imprison a monster was now trapped in one himself, and only another miracle of invention could set him free. Fate, pride, and consequence wove together like invisible threads around his heart. He turned to Icarus. With a gentle but trembling voice, Daedalus began to prepare his son. He knew how young, curious, and dream-filled Icarus was, and how dangerous that could be in the open sky. On the chosen day, he carefully fastened the wings to his son's shoulders, checking every strap, every thread, every drop of wax. Then he spoke softly, yet firmly. "My son, listen to me. Your life depends on this. Do not fly too high, or the sun will melt the wax. Do not fly too low, or the sea will soak the feathers. Stay between sky and water. Follow me, and we will be free." Icarus nodded, his eyes shining with wonder, and together they rose into the air. They left behind the island, the labyrinth, and the dark secret of King Minos. At first, everything was perfect. The wings carried them gently over the endless blue sea. Daedalus watched his son carefully, signaling him to stay close, to stay balanced. But for Icarus, this was more than flight. It was freedom. The sky called to him. The sunlight danced on his feathers. And soon he forgot his father's warnings. Higher and higher he rose, until the heat of the sun softened the wax. Feathers began to drift away. Icarus fell. Daedalus cried out, but it was too late. The sea embraced his son and kept him forever. And above the waves, a broken father hovered in silence. The myth of Icarus whispers gently through time, reminding us that dreams must walk beside wisdom, and that even the brightest sky has its limits. And as that tragedy faded into the sea, another destiny was quietly being born. The story of Theseus was just beginning. When Aethra reached the quiet shore, the waves slowly parted before her, and from the deep blue waters rose Poseidon himself, mighty lord of the seas. That sacred night, Aethra was united with the ocean god, and so Theseus was given a twofold destiny. He was the son of mortal King Aegeus, and of divine Poseidon. Because of this, the gods watched over him, blessing him with rare courage, great strength, and a spirit that would one day echo through all of Greece. At dawn, before Aegeus returned to Athens, he led Aethra to a massive stone near a temple. Beneath it he placed her sandals and his shining sword. "When my son is strong enough to lift this stone," Aegeus whispered, "let him come to me in Athens. Then I will know him and call him my heir." So Theseus grew in Trozen, guided by his mother and by his wise grandfather Pithois, who taught him not only how to fight, but how to think, how to be just, how to understand the hearts of others. Even as a child, Theseus showed great strength and fearless curiosity. He never chose the easy path, only the one that made him stronger. When he turned 16, Aethra revealed the truth. She showed him the stone, and with calm power, he lifted it and claimed his sword and sandals. The journey to Athens was filled with danger. Yet Theseus chose the land route, the most dangerous of all. And along that road, he faced monsters, and men more cruel than monsters. One by one, he defeated them. Periphetes with the iron club, Sinis, the pine bender, the savage boar of Chromion, the cruel Siren, the mighty Cercyon, and finally, the twisted Procrustes. Each time, Theseus returned their cruelty back to them, showing the world that injustice always comes back to its source. And so, as his name spread across Greece like a soft echo, Theseus finally reached Athens, where his true destiny was waiting. Yet in Athens, a new danger was already waiting. At that time, the court of Athens was ruled by Medea, the famous sorceress and the wife of King Aegeus. Wise and powerful, yet deeply afraid of losing her influence, Medea had long suspected that the arrival of this young hero could destroy everything she had built. If Theseus were accepted as Aegeus' son, her own children would lose their claim to the throne. And so, fear whispered into her heart, and fear slowly turned into poison. During a royal feast, she offered Theseus a cup of wine laced with a deadly potion. The moment was quiet, almost peaceful, yet fate was watching closely. Just as the cup was raised, King Aegeus noticed something familiar, the sword at the young man's side and the sandals upon his feet. In an instant, recognition struck his heart. "My son?" With trembling hands, he knocked the poisoned cup away and gathered Theseus into his arms. The lost heir had returned. Medea's plot was revealed, and before the anger of Athens could fall upon her, she fled into the eastern lands, disappearing into legend, leaving only whispers of betrayal behind. But Theseus had no time to rest. A darker destiny was calling. Long before his birth, Athens had suffered a terrible defeat at the hands of King Minos of Crete. And from that war came a cruel punishment. Every 9 years, 7 young men and 7 young women were sent across the sea to be devoured by the Minotaur, the monstrous beast hidden deep within the labyrinth. Black sails carried them away, symbols of grief, symbols of no return. When the time came again, Theseus stepped forward. "I will go," he said softly, yet with unbreakable resolve. He promised his father, "If I return victorious, the black sails shall be changed to white." And so he sailed to Crete, toward danger and toward destiny. At Knossos, he was seen by Ariadne, daughter of King Minos, and in her heart a gentle love was born. That night, she secretly came to him, bringing not only hope, but a thread, a simple strand of wool that would guide him back from the darkness, the thread of Ariadne, and a hidden blade. With these gifts, Theseus stepped into the labyrinth, toward the sleeping monster, and toward the fate that would change 2 kingdoms forever. The next morning, Theseus and the other captives were led toward the labyrinth. The enormous structure, both majestic and terrifying, descended deep beneath the earth, as if the world itself had opened a dark wound. Even the bravest hearts felt a quiet fear as they approached its shadow. When the young men and women were pushed inside, the heavy gates slowly closed behind them, leaving the Athenian captives alone with their fate. In the soft echoing silence, Theseus tied the end of Ariadne's thread to the stone at the entrance and began to walk forward, gently unspooling the fragile line of hope behind him. The deeper he went, the darker and more twisted the corridors became. The air grew thick, heavy with ancient breath, until far ahead he heard it, a deep, rumbling breath and a dreadful roar. The Minotaur was coming. Sensing a human presence, the monstrous creature charged forward, hooves striking stone, horns cutting through the air. The battle that followed was fierce and desperate. Theseus dodged massive blows, his heart pounding, his body pushed to its limits. And in a final, fragile moment, guided by courage and love, he struck with Ariadne's blade, driving it deep into the creature's heart. The Minotaur let out one last terrible cry, and fell. Silence returned to the labyrinth. Breathing softly, Theseus followed the golden thread back through the twisting halls, leading not only himself, but all the Athenians, back to the light. When the gates opened, the people of Crete stood in disbelief. Never before had anyone returned alive. Ariadne, waiting with trembling hope, saw Theseus emerge and knew that her love had saved them all. He kept his promise and took her with him onto the ship, ending the terrible tribute that had haunted Athens for so long. Yet fate was not finished. On the journey home, they stopped at the quiet island of Naxos. There, beneath soft stars and gentle waves, something mysterious occurred. Some say the gods commanded Theseus to leave Ariadne behind, for her destiny belonged to Dionysus. Others say she slept on the shore, and the ship sailed without her by mistake. And some whisper that Dionysus himself appeared, claiming her as his bride. However it happened, Ariadne awoke alone. Her heart broke, until Dionysus came to her, lifting her into a new, eternal life among the gods. Meanwhile, Theseus sailed on, forgetting one crucial promise. The black sails were never changed. King Aegeus, seeing them from afar, believed his son had died. In grief, he leapt into the sea, and the waters took his name forever. Thus the Aegean Sea was born. Theseus returned to Athens not to joy, but to mourning, and a crown weighed with sorrow. Yet his heroism lived on, a reminder that even the greatest victories carry a hidden cost. And now, as this tale softly fades, another story begins, the story of Perseus and the cursed beauty of Medusa. Other sources say that Medusa was unable, or did not dare, to resist the mighty god, being only a mortal girl. There are also interpretations in which their union is presented as voluntary, that Medusa herself returned Poseidon's affection, thus breaking her vow of chastity and bringing Athena's wrath upon herself. Yet all ancient authors agree on one thing. Athena perceived what had happened as the deepest personal insult and an unbearable desecration of her sacred temple. Many scholars and mythologists have long wondered why Athena directed all her fury at Medusa rather than at Poseidon. In ancient mythology, gods were rarely punished for such acts, and Athena, as the goddess of wisdom, understood the futility of seeking vengeance against so powerful a deity as Poseidon. Moreover, Poseidon belonged to the generation of Olympian gods equal to Athena in power and influence. Thus, the goddess's anger fell upon the weaker link, the mortal woman who had been caught in the center of this tragic event. Enraged, Athena chose to punish Medusa cruelly, transforming her from a beautiful maiden into a hideous monster. Athena stripped Medusa of her former beauty and gave her a terrifying form. Her glorious golden hair turned into a writhing mass of living venomous snakes, forever hissing and twisting. Her eyes were granted a dreadful power. Anyone who looked upon her was instantly turned to stone. From that moment on, instead of love and admiration, Medusa inspired only horror and revulsion in all living beings. Thus Medusa became one of the most frightening and tragic figures in Greek myth, forced to hide from the world. She settled in a distant and desolate land, among the stone statues of those who had once looked upon her and lost their lives. She was condemned to eternal loneliness and despair, becoming a symbol of tragedy and of the inescapable punishment of the gods, even for unintentional transgressions. Her story reminded the ancient Greeks of the capricious and merciless nature of the gods, and of how even the most beautiful and innocent beings could be cast into suffering by a cruel twist of fate. It was this terrible being that the young hero Perseus was destined to face, a meeting that would become one of the most famous and perilous feats in all of ancient Greece. Perseus's life was darkened from the very beginning by ominous circumstances and grim prophecies, casting a shadow over his fate even before his birth. His arrival in the world was itself a troubling omen and a source of suffering for his mother. It seemed as though the gods had decided to test him from his very first moments, shaping the long chain of trials and adventures that would define his destiny. Perseus was born from the union of a mortal woman named Danae and the supreme Olympian god Zeus. Danae was the beautiful daughter of King Acrisius, ruler of Argos. Troubled by his lack of a male heir, Acrisius consulted the oracle of Apollo, asking whether a grandson would be born to him. The answer was dark and terrifying. Acrisius would be killed by his own grandson, the son of Danae. Horrified by this prophecy, the king resolved to prevent it at all costs. He locked his daughter in a deep underground chamber, guarded so that no man could reach her. But no prison could stop the king of the gods. Zeus, enchanted by Danae's beauty, transformed himself into a shower of golden rain, passed through the walls of her prison, and secretly united with her. From this strange and wondrous union, Perseus was born, the hero destined to leave an everlasting mark on Greek history. When Acrisius discovered that Danae had borne a child, he was seized by rage and fear. Unwilling to openly kill a divine offspring, he ordered Danae and the infant Perseus to be sealed inside a wooden chest and cast into the sea, trusting the waves to do what he dared not. But fate was kind to mother and child. The chest did not sink. Instead, it washed ashore on the small island of Seriphos, where it was found by a kind fisherman named Dictys. He took pity on them and gave them shelter, surrounding them with care. There Perseus grew into a strong and noble young man, though neither he nor his mother yet knew what trials awaited them. In time, Danae's beauty attracted not only the admiration of the islanders, but also the attention of the island's cruel and cunning ruler, King Polydex, Dictys' brother. Polydex became obsessed with marrying Danae, but Perseus, now grown, boldly stood in his way. Wanting to rid himself of this dangerous rival, Polydex devised a clever and deadly scheme. The king announced that he would marry another woman and held a great banquet, to which all the noble men of the island were invited, including Perseus. By custom, each guest was expected to bring a wedding gift. Perseus, however, was poor and could offer nothing worthy. Polydex mocked him, and exploiting the young man's pride and sense of honor, provoked him into making a reckless vow to bring him the head of Medusa, the Gorgon. Stung by the insult and eager to defend his mother's honor, Perseus made this fatal promise, not fully realizing the deadly danger he had accepted. Polydex was pleased, knowing that no one had ever returned alive from confronting Medusa. Yet fate had other plans. Though the task seemed impossible, help soon came from the gods themselves. Athena and Hermes, at Zeus's request, chose to aid the young hero. Athena appeared first. Though she had cursed Medusa, she now decided to help Perseus, knowing that someone must end the monster's existence, and that Perseus, son of Zeus, was the one she favored. She gave him a priceless gift, a polished shield so smooth and bright that it reflected like a perfect mirror. "You must never look directly at Medusa," Athena told him, "but her reflection in this shield will allow you to strike without meeting her deadly gaze." Next to come to Perseus's aid was Hermes, the god of travelers, and the swift messenger of the Olympians, a divine protector of heroes who often guided them through their most dangerous trials. Hermes gifted Perseus his own sacred sword, light, perfectly balanced, and so sharp that it could cut through metal, stone, and even the toughest armor as if it were soft silk. Hermes also told the young hero that his journey was far from complete. To succeed, Perseus would need several more enchanted items, hidden at the farthest edge of the world and guarded by ancient nymphs. Without these sacred tools, no mortal could ever reach Medusa's lair and survive. Following Hermes' guidance, Perseus set out to find the Griae, 3 ancient sisters who shared a single eye and a single tooth between them. These strange beings were born old, and their appearance never changed with time. They lived at the boundary between worlds, possessing hidden knowledge of secret paths and forbidden places. Though they seemed weak and frail, their wisdom was priceless, and only they could reveal the way to the nymphs and their magical treasures. With cleverness rather than force, Perseus tricked the Griae. At the moment they passed their single eye from one to another, he seized it, holding it tightly in his hand. Blind and frightened, the sisters were forced to reveal the location of the nymphs in exchange for the return of their precious eye. Once they spoke, Perseus honored his word, gave the eye back, and continued his journey. When Perseus finally reached the nymphs, they bestowed upon him 2 extraordinary gifts. The first was the Helm of Invisibility, belonging to Hades, the god of the underworld. When worn, it made its bearer completely unseen by any creature, mortal, monster, or even god. With this, Perseus could approach Medusa without being detected, stripping the monster of her greatest advantage. The second gift was a pair of winged sandals, light and shimmering with divine magic. They allowed Perseus to soar effortlessly through the air, passing over mountains, deserts, and deadly obstacles as if floating upon a gentle breeze. With these wings upon his feet, the hero could descend upon Medusa from above, striking without warning. Thus, with the blessings of the gods, Perseus gained not only the tools he needed, but also quiet confidence in his destiny. Armed with divine gifts and steady courage, he set out toward the dark lands where Medusa dwelled, knowing he was not merely facing a monster, but his own fate. Medusa lived in a gloomy cavern, surrounded by endless wastelands and filled with countless stone statues, silent witnesses to all who had come before and never returned. The air itself felt heavy with fear, as though the land had absorbed centuries of despair and death. As Perseus approached, he knew that her gaze was the greatest danger of all. He placed the Helm of Invisibility upon his head, vanishing from sight, and rose silently into the air with his winged sandals, gliding over the frozen figures and descending toward the cave. Inside, he saw Medusa for the first time. only as a reflection in Athena's shining shield. She lay resting among her writhing serpents, unaware of the danger near her. Even reflected, her form was so terrible that it filled the heart with dread. Slowly, carefully, Perseus moved closer, never looking directly at her, keeping his eyes only on her image in the mirrored surface. His heart beat fast, but his hands remained steady. One mistake would mean instant death. The snakes began to stir. Medusa was waking. A soft hiss echoed through the cave. In that very moment, Perseus gathered all his courage and struck. Hermes' sword flashed like lightning, and with one swift, perfect movement, he severed Medusa's head before her eyes could open. The monster fell silent forever. From her body sprang two wondrous beings, the winged horse Pegasus and the warrior Chrysaor, children of Medusa and Poseidon, born from that tragic union. Chrysaor soon vanished, leaving no mark on Perseus' story, while Pegasus soared into legend. But danger had not ended. Medusa's immortal sisters, Stheno and Euryale, awoke, shrieking in fury. With wings, scales, and bronze claws, they rushed to hunt the killer. Perseus quickly placed Medusa's head into his sacred bag, careful never to meet her deadly gaze. Then, using his sandals and the helm, he vanished into the sky, escaping their terrible cries. Victorious, Perseus flew back toward Seriphos, but fate had yet another miracle waiting. Soaring across seas and distant lands, he passed over Ethiopia, where he saw a tragic sight: a beautiful young woman chained to a rock by the sea. This was Andromeda, doomed because of her mother Cassiopeia's pride. Her mother had claimed she was more beautiful than the sea nymphs, and Poseidon had sent a monstrous creature to punish the land. To save their people, Andromeda was offered as a sacrifice. Seeing her despair, Perseus descended, and upon learning her story, he knew he could not turn away. Falling in love with her at first sight, Perseus immediately went to King Cepheus and his wife with a solemn offer. He swore that he would destroy the terrible monster and save their daughter, but only on one condition: that Andromeda would become his wife. The desperate parents agreed without hesitation, barely daring to hope that the young hero could truly complete such an impossible task. At that very moment, the sea began to stir. On the far horizon, the monster appeared, rising from the dark waters and moving steadily toward the shore. It was enormous and terrifying, its body covered in thick, impenetrable scales, its jaws filled with massive, jagged fangs, and its powerful fins cutting through the waves. The sea itself seemed to part before it, and its thunderous roar echoed across the coast, making all who heard it tremble with fear. But Perseus did not hesitate. With the help of his winged sandals, he lifted himself into the air and began circling above the creature, skillfully avoiding its furious attacks. The battle was long and exhausting, and for a time it seemed as though no mortal blow could pierce the monster's hide. Then Perseus remembered the terrible and powerful weapon he carried, the head of Medusa. With swift determination, he drew it from his sacred bag and turned its deadly gaze toward the beast. In an instant, the monster was frozen into solid stone, transformed into a massive lifeless statue that slowly sank beneath the waves, forever freeing Ethiopia from its terror. Perseus gently released Andromeda from her chains and led her back to her parents. The people welcomed him as a savior and a hero, and King Cepheus, faithful to his promise, blessed their union. Soon, a magnificent wedding was held in celebration of love, courage, and deliverance. Yet even in the midst of joy, danger returned. Phineus, the brother of King Cepheus, arrived at the feast with armed followers. Andromeda had once been promised to him, and he now sought to claim her by force. Chaos erupted in the hall as weapons were drawn. But Perseus ended the conflict swiftly and decisively. Once more, he revealed Medusa's head, and Phineus along with his men were turned into stone, frozen forever in their rage and betrayal. Thus Andromeda was saved again, and her bond with Perseus was sealed not only by fate, but by unwavering devotion. Their love became one of the most beautiful and enduring stories of ancient Greece. After these triumphs, Perseus returned to Seriphos, to his mother Danae, only to discover that King Polydex had continued to torment her, forcing her toward an unwanted marriage. Filled with righteous anger, Perseus confronted the cruel ruler. Before the gathered nobles, he revealed Medusa's head, and Polydex and his followers were turned into stone. Perseus freed his mother and rewarded the kind fisherman Dictys by making him king. Later, Perseus traveled to see his grandfather Acrisius, but fate could not be escaped. During athletic games, a thrown discus struck Acrisius by accident, fulfilling the ancient prophecy. Grieved, Perseus refused the throne and ruled peacefully elsewhere with Andromeda. When his life ended, the gods honored him by placing him and Andromeda among the stars. Their constellations still glow softly in the night sky, along with Cassiopeia, Cepheus, Pegasus, and even the sea monster, eternal reminders of love, courage, and destiny. After defeating the Chimera, Bellerophon felt a great weight lifted from his shoulders, and his confidence grew. He had proven that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable chaos, there is always a way to victory if one has determination, intelligence, and a loyal companion. Pegasus became not only his friend and helper, but also a symbol of freedom and the flight of thought, enabling him to overcome any boundary. But fate was not yet finished with the hero. Returning to the land, Bellerophon soon learned of new intrigues awaiting him. News of his exploits spread throughout Lycia, and many envied the hero, wishing to control them by force or deceit. Among them was Antea, whose pride and resentment had not yet faded. Despite the dangers, Bellerophon remained faithful to the laws of honor, which he had upheld since childhood. He did not give in to anger and refrained from revenge without cause, trusting in the gods and his own judgment. His journeys continued, full of trials and extraordinary encounters. He faced those who sought to test his strength, wisdom, and courage, and each time he emerged victorious, relying on cleverness, strategy, and Pegasus' wings. The victory over the Chimera also carried profound symbolic meaning. The beast embodied chaos and destructive forces surrounding humanity, natural disasters, inner fears, injustice, and deceit. Its many heads reminded that problems often come from multiple directions at once, and to overcome them, one must combine intellect, cunning, and courage. The fact that the hero was able to outsmart the monster and turn its own fury against it became a metaphor for how humans can turn dangers to their advantage. Thus, Bellerophon entered legend as a hero who could overcome mortal trials, tame the winged horse, and defeat a creature thought to be invincible. He became an example of how honor, ingenuity, courage, and divine favor allow mortals to perform feats capable of changing the fate of entire lands. Although his path was filled with hardships and dangers, Bellerophon remained a man whose heart was open to justice, honesty, and friendship, and his name was forever inscribed among the great heroes of Greek mythology. It is interesting to note that after Bellerophon's victory, the local people began to revere him as a great hero who had freed the land from terror, and they erected numerous monuments in honor of his feat. This myth also emphasizes the importance of staying true to oneself and one's honor, even when circumstances seem against you, and demonstrates that even in the most difficult trials, a person can find a way and achieve victory. After Bellerophon completed his feat and defeated the fearsome Chimera, he returned to King Iobates, believing that he had finally earned the right to peace and tranquility. But the king was deeply shocked that the hero had survived and managed to overcome a seemingly invincible monster. Seeking to fulfill the request and get rid of the hero, Iobates assigned Bellerophon new, no less dangerous tasks, hoping that at least one would lead to the hero's death. First, Iobates sent Bellerophon to fight the mighty people of the Solymi, known for their ferocity and savagery in battle. The Solymi were an ancient tribe living in Asia Minor, in what is now Turkey, and were famed for their martial skill. Their warrior reputation was so great that legends were told of them, and even the bravest warriors tried to avoid direct combat with them. Bellerophon, however, did not lose heart. Mounting his faithful winged horse, he swiftly attacked the Salimi army from the air. Moving quickly above the battlefield, he struck his opponents with unexpected attacks and sowed panic among them. As a result, he won victory and forced the Salimi to acknowledge his greatness and retreat in shame. Then, a disappointed Iobaeus sent him on a campaign against the warrior tribe of Amazons, formidable female warriors known for their outstanding combat skills and ruthlessness toward enemies. The Amazons were famed throughout Hellas for their valor and ability to easily defeat even the most experienced fighters. Their queen was so skilled and powerful that many kings preferred to avoid meeting her on the battlefield. Despite this, Bellerophon courageously engaged the Amazons, using clever tactics and the unique abilities of his winged horse. In swift aerial attacks, he disarmed the warriors, forcing them to drop their weapons and retreat. After a long and exhausting battle, the Amazons admitted defeat, and Bellerophon returned to Iobates victorious once again, causing only growing anxiety and despair for the king. Finally, desperate, the king decided to take extreme measures and orchestrated a plot against the hero, secretly sending his best warriors to ambush Bellerophon, hoping to kill him. These warriors were known as the most skilled and ruthless fighters of Lycia, capable of handling almost any opponent. But even they could not catch the hero off guard. Bellerophon was alert. He skillfully used Pegasus' speed and maneuverability to evade the attack and in turn, strike the conspirators from the air. In the skirmish, he destroyed the squad, finally convincing Iobates of his divine protection. Amazed by Bellerophon's resilience and fortune, Iobates finally realized that the hero enjoyed the special favor of the gods and decided to stop trying to destroy him. Instead, he honored Bellerophon as the greatest hero and gave him his daughter Phileno in marriage, granting him half of his kingdom. Thus, Bellerophon gained fame, wealth, power, and the respect of all the people of Lycia. But this is where the true tragedy of the hero began. Having obtained everything a mortal could dream of, Bellerophon gradually began to lose his prudence. He became prideful and began to believe in his absolute superiority, not only over humans, but even over the gods themselves. He decided he deserved a place among the immortals and dreamed of ascending to Olympus, where the Olympic gods dwelled, to take his place among them. Blinded by his own arrogance and forgetting that he was only human, Bellerophon mounted Pegasus and soared into the sky, striving to reach Olympus and become equal to the gods. This audacious act was perceived by the gods as the greatest sacrilege and insult. The supreme god Zeus, enraged by Bellerophon's hubris, immediately punished the hero by sending a giant gadfly, which bit Pegasus in the most sensitive spot. Frightened and maddened by pain, the horse threw Bellerophon to the ground. The fall was terrible and cruel. Bellerophon, once the greatest of heroes, survived but suffered severe injuries and became a cripple for life. From that moment on, he was forced to wander alone, avoiding the company of people who had once exalted him but now turned away, seeing him as punished for excessive pride. The end of Bellerophon became a somber lesson for all mortals. His story vividly showed how dangerous it is to forget one as human nature and attempt to rise above the limits set by the gods. The myth of Bellerophon was meant to remind people that even the greatest feats do not grant the right to place oneself above the gods, and that true greatness lies not in pride, but in wisdom, humility, and the ability to accept one's destiny with dignity. And now we move to one of the most touching and tragic love stories in all of Greek mythology. This is the story of the great musician Orpheus and his beloved Eurydice. It is a tale of how great love can transcend even the boundaries between life and death, and how even the brightest feelings can sometimes turn to sorrow and loss. Orpheus was strikingly different from other Greek heroes. His main weapon was not physical strength, but the magical power of art. In an era when heroes performed feats by defeating terrible monsters and enemies, Orpheus conquered hearts and souls with his extraordinary music and poetry. Unlike his contemporaries, celebrated in battles and warfare, he preferred the lyre, poetry, and song to bloodshed. Orpheus was the son of the beautiful muse Calliope, patroness of epic poetry and eloquence, and the legendary Thracian king Ogus. According to some myths, his father was the god of the sun and arts, Apollo himself, who endowed Orpheus with his extraordinary musical talent. From childhood, the boy was surrounded by the Muses, who taught him not only music and singing, but also wisdom, the secret knowledge of nature, and even prophecy. Orpheus' main instrument was a magical lyre, created by Hermes and given to him by Apollo. This lyre was made from a turtle shell with magical strings stretched across it, capable of producing melodies so beautiful that no one could resist them. Orpheus' music had supernatural power and could perform true wonders. When he played, the world around him seemed to stop in admiration. Rivers slowed their flow to listen. Birds forgot to fly and perched at his feet. Even the wildest beasts lost their ferocity and peacefully lay down beside herbivores. Legends say that Orpheus could move mountains and trees with the sound of his voice, and his songs were so beautiful that even stones wept with emotion. But it was not only nature that obeyed Orpheus' magical charms. The gods of Olympus, usually restrained and formidable, were so impressed by his talent that they allowed him to enter their domain and even influence their decisions. He was the only mortal whose counsel they trusted and whose advice they heeded. The musician was famous not only in Hellas, but far beyond. His name was known in the most distant lands. Despite his fame and universal admiration, Orpheus sought neither enmity nor power. He devoted himself to art and love, living modestly and avoiding noisy fame, preferring solitude and harmony. Orpheus' life was filled with beauty, harmony, and glory. However, fate had a trial in store for him, one capable of breaking even the strongest hero. Orpheus not only gained fame as a great musician, but also the chance to experience true love, which illuminated his life with the brightest and warmest light. His chosen one was the beautiful nymph Eurydice, a girl of extraordinary beauty and tenderness. She was one of the dryads, living among the trees and flowers, caring for the forests and meadows. Her beauty and grace were like a delicate flower, attracting the gaze and hearts of all who saw her. From the moment of their first meeting, the hearts of Orpheus and Eurydice joined in a single rhythm of love. According to ancient myths, they first met during a spring festival where Orpheus was playing his magical lyre. Hearing his music, Eurydice stopped, enchanted by the beautiful sounds, as if her soul recognized something very familiar and dear within them. Orpheus, raising his eyes, saw among the listeners the beautiful nymph, whose image would forever reside in his heart. Their feelings were mutual and quickly grew into a deep, true love that filled their lives with special light and harmony. The wedding of Orpheus and Eurydice was a celebration not only for them, but for all living beings. It seemed that nature itself rejoiced in this union, blooming more brightly and giving off stronger fragrance on the day of their celebration. Even the gods of Olympus were pleased with the happiness of their beloved musician, blessing the couple with a long and joyful life. At the celebration, Orpheus played the most beautiful melodies he had ever composed, so full of joy and love that all present could not hold back tears of emotion. But fate prepared a cruel trial for the young couple. Their happiness proved tragically brief. One day, shortly after the wedding, Eurydice was walking through green meadows and forests with her fellow dryads, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the freshness of the morning breeze. However, her beauty attracted the attention of Aristeus, a young shepherd who became passionately enamored with her. Seeing Eurydice, Aristeus began to chase her, attempting to win her affection. Frightened by his pursuit, Eurydice ran But in her haste, she did not notice a snake hidden in the tall grass. The venomous creature struck immediately, and the beautiful Eurydice fell unconscious. When Orpheus learned of the tragedy, his heart was torn apart by grief and pain. Nothing could console him. He refused food and sleep, endlessly mourning the loss of his beloved. His lyre no longer produced joyful music. Its strings sounded only sad and mournful melodies, which plunged even nature into deep sorrow. In despair, Orpheus made a decision that no mortal had dared to make. He resolved to descend into the underworld to bring Eurydice back to life. Many tried to dissuade him, saying that no one had ever returned from Hades' dark realm. But Orpheus was steadfast. He believed that the power of his love and the magic of his music could soften the hearts of even the harshest rulers of the underworld. Taking his magical lyre in hand and determined to reclaim his beloved, Orpheus made his way to the entrance of the realm of shadows, ready to face death for the only chance to see Eurydice alive again. He ventured into the darkest and most mysterious place of the ancient Greek world, the kingdom of the dead, where no living foot had ever stepped. The entrance to the underworld lay far from light and sun, in deep and gloomy ravines, surrounded by endless darkness, mist, and sorrow. But even these grim landscapes could not stop Orpheus, guided by the force of his love. With his magical lyre, he accomplished what almost no mortal could. He overcame numerous terrifying and dangerous obstacles guarding Hades' realm. It is worth noting that Hercules had also descended into the underworld, but he did so with brute strength, whereas Orpheus succeeded through his art. The first trial for Orpheus was to cross the river Styx, the black river of sorrow that separates the world of the living from the world of the dead. Its grim ferryman, Charon, usually demanded a gold coin from the souls of the deceased for passage. But Orpheus, playing the softest and most piercing melody on his lyre, moved Charon so deeply that he ferried him silently across the gloomy waters without asking for payment. Ahead awaited another fearsome guardian, a terrible three-headed dog Cerberus, who guarded the gates of the underworld, preventing the living from entering and the dead from leaving. Venom dripped from his sharp fangs, and his growl could instill fear even in the bravest hero. But as soon as Orpheus began to play, Cerberus fell silent, enchanted by the music. His eyes filled with calm, and his fearsome heads lay down, allowing the hero to pass unimpeded. Next, Orpheus crossed the bleak and endless fields of Asphodel, where wandered the shades of the dead, who had forgotten the joys and sorrows of life. The shades, usually indifferent and silent, suddenly gathered around the hero, listening to the sounds of his song and recalling long-forgotten feelings and experiences. His music awakened echoes of life within them, and many wept bitterly, feeling the warmth and light of the sunlit world that was forever lost. Finally, Orpheus reached the throne of the ruler of the underworld himself, the grim Hades and his spouse, the beautiful Persephone. He stopped before them, surrounded by the shadows of departed souls, and began to sing. His song was so touching and sorrowful that even the cold hearts of Hades and Persephone melted with pity and compassion. The shades of the dead fell silent, and the endless fields of Asphodel were enveloped in absolute quiet, listening to the exquisite and heart-wrenching sounds of the lyre. In his song, Orpheus recounted his boundless love for Eurydice, the happiness he had lost, and the pain that would never subside in his heart. He begged the rulers of the underworld to allow him to bring his beloved back to the earth and give her a second chance to live and love. Never before had Hades agreed to release a soul back to life, but Orpheus' music, filled with purity and the sincerity of his feelings, made the god consider mercy for the first time. Finally, Hades and Persephone made their decision, struck by the depth of his feelings and talent. They placed only one, but extremely important, condition before Orpheus. He could lead Eurydice back to the earth, but all the way from the underworld to the exit into the light, he must not look back at her even once. If he violated this condition and looked back too soon, Eurydice would remain forever in the realm of shadows, and no power could return her. Orpheus was infinitely grateful to the gods for this chance, and gladly accepted their terms. He turned and began the journey back to the exit of Hades' gloomy domain, feeling the soft, almost inaudible steps of his beloved following him, whom he had longed to see alive again. All that remained was to endure the final test and resist the temptation to look back. Orpheus moved slowly and cautiously back from Hades' dark kingdom, feeling the faint and almost silent steps of Eurydice behind him. It seemed that the path to salvation was very near, and Orpheus could almost see the glimmering sunlight ahead, promising to return them both to a happy life. However, as they approached the exit from the realm of shadows, doubt and anxiety began to gnaw at Orpheus' heart. He did not hear Eurydice's voice, and did not feel her breath. Behind him was only absolute silence, broken only by his own steps and the sound of his own heart. With each step, the doubts grew stronger, eating away at him from within. What if Hades deceived him? What if Eurydice remained in the realm of the dead, and behind him was only an illusion or a cruel trick of the gods? These doubts and fears tormented Orpheus more than the most terrifying trials he had faced before. His faith and confidence faded with every step. He could no longer bear the uncertainty. Only a few steps from the exit, consumed by unbearable anxiety, Orpheus could no longer resist and made a fatal mistake. He looked back to make sure that his beloved was truly following him. The very moment his gaze fell upon Eurydice, he realized he had done the irreparable. Eurydice was standing behind him, her eyes full of sorrow, tenderness, and boundless love. In her gaze reflected the longing and regret for a life that could have been theirs, but was now forever lost. Their eyes met for only an instant. Then she slowly began to vanish. Her form dissolved into the cold air of the underworld. Orpheus, full of despair, tried to grasp her, but his hands passed through nothing but air, and soon only emptiness and silent darkness remained before him. Devastated and broken, Orpheus attempted to return once more to Hades' realm, but this time the gates were closed to him. The underworld had sealed its doors forever, and now nothing could bring Eurydice back. The hero was forced to leave the underworld, condemned to live forever with the bitterness of his loss. Returning to the world of the living, Orpheus had changed completely. He could no longer find joy in life, nor comfort in music, or in the beauty of nature he once loved. His songs were now filled with endless grief and despair. They no longer brought solace, only amplifying his pain. Orpheus avoided the company of people, preferring solitude and loneliness, and his life gradually became an endless chain of sorrowful days and nights, filled with suffering and memories of what he had lost. Even in his grief, he remained faithful to the memory of Eurydice, unwilling to share his life or feelings with anyone. This provoked the wrath of the Maenads, women devoted to the god Dionysus, who could not accept that Orpheus had rejected their love and attention. One day, driven by mad frenzy, they attacked Orpheus, tearing his body to pieces, and threw his remains into the river Hebrus. According to legend, even in that terrible moment, his head, floating down the river, continued to quietly sing songs of love and loss. The gods, moved by the tragic fate of the great musician, showed mercy and respect for his talent. The Muses buried Orpheus' remains at the foot of Mount Olympus, where, according to myth, his quiet and sorrowful melodies can still be heard. Orpheus' lyre was placed among the stars as a constellation, a lasting reminder of his extraordinary talent and tragic love. Orpheus' fate became a symbol of one of the greatest human dramas. His fatal mistake, his uncertainty, and loss of faith symbolize how fear and doubt can destroy even the most beautiful and pure feelings. His myth is a story of human weakness and fragility, showing that even the greatest love requires faith, patience, and unwavering devotion. By looking back, Orpheus, unwittingly, questioned the promise given by the gods, thus breaking the balance of trust and faith necessary to bring Eurydice back. This moment became a profound and symbolic reminder that love cannot exist without trust and faith in one another, and that sometimes even the strongest and most sincere love is powerless against the fears and doubts of the human heart. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice has inspired poets, musicians, and artists for millennia, reminding people of the importance of cherishing and valuing those we love, and how easily and tragically happiness can be lost when fear and doubt take hold. Now we move to the final story of our journey through ancient Greek myths. This is the story of a man whose fate was predetermined by a cruel and mysterious prophecy. The story of Oedipus is one of the most dramatic and profound in Greek mythology. It tells how fate and destiny can control a person's life, despite all their efforts and intentions. It all began in the ancient city of Thebes, ruled by King Laius and his beautiful wife, Jocasta. For many years, the couple remained childless, which troubled the king. Seeking to know whether he would have an heir, King Laius traveled to the sacred city of Delphi, home of Apollo's famous oracle, who foretold people's destinies. However, the answer he received from the oracle not only failed to reassure the king, but filled him with terror and despair. The prophecy stated that the son born to Laius and Jocasta would kill his own father and marry his mother, bringing terrible disasters and misfortune to the entire kingdom. Shocked and frightened by this prediction, King Laius returned home with a heavy heart and told Jocasta everything. Soon, the couple did indeed have a son, whom they named Oedipus. Despite their love for the child, the fear of the terrible prophecy outweighed their parental feelings. To avoid his fate, the king decided on a cruel course of action. He ordered a servant to take the newborn to the mountains and leave him there to be devoured by wild animals. But the servant, pitying the innocent child, could not carry out the cruel order. Instead, he took the boy to shepherds from nearby Corinth, who in turn delivered him to King Polybus and Queen Merope, who, having no children of their own, gladly accepted the boy and raised him as their own son. Oedipus grew up believing fully that he was the son of Polybus and Merope and a prince of Corinth. However, one day at a festival, one of the drunken guests revealed to him that he was adopted. This sowed doubt in the young prince's heart. Filled with anxiety and a desire to know the truth about his origins, Oedipus set out on his own to Delphi, to the same oracle who had given the terrible prophecy to his real father years earlier. The oracle's answer was again horrifying. It repeated the same prophecy that Laius had once heard. Oedipus would kill his father and marry his mother. Oedipus was terrified, but unaware that Polybus and Merope were not his real parents. Convinced that the only way to avoid this dreadful fate was never to return to Corinth, he traveled in the opposite direction, unknowingly bringing the prophecy closer to fulfillment. The road to Thebes led through rugged mountain passes and narrow gorges, where travelers often faced various dangers and hardships. In one such gorge, a narrow and steep pass, Oedipus encountered a chariot traveling toward him. In it sat a man of imposing authority, accompanied by servants. The charioteer rudely ordered Oedipus to yield the way, but the proud young man refused, considering the demand insulting. A fierce quarrel broke out, quickly escalating into a fight. In this struggle, Oedipus displayed his strength and skill, killing the stranger and nearly all his servants, except for one who managed to escape. Oedipus did not know that at this fateful moment, he had taken the first step toward fulfilling the terrible prophecy. The man he killed was none other than King Laius, his real father, whose existence he had not even suspected. Completely unaware of the dreadful significance of this event, Oedipus continued on his path. Soon he approached the city of Thebes, an ancient and once prosperous city, now enduring the gravest of times. The city was besieged by a terrible creature called the Sphinx, a monster sent by the gods as punishment for the sins of King Laius and the people of Thebes. The Sphinx was a mythical being from distant eastern lands with a mysterious origin. She had the head and chest of a young woman, the body of a lion, powerful wings of an eagle, and a serpent's tail. Her very appearance inspired terror and awe. According to legend, she was the daughter of the ancient monsters Echidna and Typhon, inheriting their ruthlessness and cunning. The gods sent her to Thebes to punish the inhabitants for the grievous sin committed by King Laius. According to myth, Laius had violated sacred laws of hospitality by abducting the son of King Pelops against his will. This dishonorable act brought the wrath of the gods upon Laius and his city, who decided to punish them with terrible trials. The Sphinx took her place on a high cliff near the gates of Thebes, stopping every traveler who attempted to enter the city. She would pose a cunning riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? No one could solve it, and the Sphinx cruelly killed all who failed to answer correctly. In a short time, the city lost many people. Fear and despair gripped the citizens of Thebes. The queen, Jocasta, recently widowed, and her brother Creon, who ruled Thebes in the absence of the deceased Laius, were in despair. The city was on the brink of ruin. They announced that the hero who could defeat the Sphinx and solve her riddle would be rewarded with the royal throne and the hand of the queen herself. Many brave warriors tried to conquer the Sphinx, but all perished, and it seemed Thebes was doomed. It was at this tragic moment that Oedipus arrived at the city gates. He heard of the riddle and decided to try his luck. The Sphinx greeted the young traveler with a sly smile, expecting yet another victim. However, Oedipus carefully listened to the riddle and calmly answered, "It is man. In the morning of his life, he crawls on all 4s. In the middle of life, he walks upright on 2 legs, and in old age, he leans on a cane, having 3 legs." The Sphinx was astounded and enraged that her riddle had been solved. Losing her power and reason for existence, she leapt from the high cliff, shattering herself to death. The citizens of Thebes welcomed Oedipus enthusiastically. Fulfilling their promise, they proclaimed him the new king and married him to Queen Jocasta, widow of the slain Laius. The symbolic meaning of the Sphinx's riddle is profound and multifaceted. It reflects the cycles of human life and reminds us that everything in life is transient and changeable. The riddle became an eternal symbol, not only of wisdom, but also of the impossibility of avoiding fate, no matter how terrifying it may seem. By solving the riddle, Oedipus unknowingly set himself on the path that would lead to the complete and tragic fulfillment of the prophecy. After defeating the Sphinx, Oedipus became a true hero and received everything a mortal could dream of: power, the respect of his people, and the hand of the beautiful Queen Jocasta. They lived together for many years and had 4 children. It seemed that fate had finally turned in Oedipus' favor. The city flourished, and the king enjoyed the boundless love of his subjects, unaware that his happiness was built on a terrible secret. Soon, however, a terrible plague struck Thebes, claiming the lives of many citizens. Desperate to find a solution, Oedipus sent a messenger to the Delphi oracle to learn how to rid the city of the disaster. The answer was frightening and cruel. The plague would end only when the murderer of the former king Laius was found and punished. Driven by the desire to save his people, Oedipus began his own investigation. He summoned the old seer Tiresias, a blind sage who knew the will of the gods. Tiresias remained silent for a long time, refusing to speak until finally compelled to reveal the terrible truth. Oedipus himself, the king, was the killer of Laius, and moreover, his own son. At first, Oedipus could not believe these words, thinking them lies or a plot against him. But gradually, step by step, as he uncovered the details of his fate, he realized that the dreadful prophecy he had spent his life trying to avoid had come true. He understood that the stranger he had killed in the mountain pass was his father, and that Jocasta, His beloved wife was actually his own mother. This horrifying revelation instantly destroyed the life of King Oedipus and his family. When Jocasta realized the truth, she was overcome with unbearable pain and despair and took her own life. Driven mad by grief and guilt, Oedipus, unable to face the cruel world or the consequences of his actions, blinded himself, gouging out his eyes. From that moment, he became a blind exile, doomed to wander alone in endless sorrow. The tragedy of Oedipus left a profound mark on human culture, becoming a symbol of the helplessness of humans before their own fate and the will of the gods. Its psychological significance is so great that in the early 20th century, the famous psychologist Sigmund Freud used Oedipus' story to describe one of the fundamental concepts of psychoanalysis, the Oedipus complex. According to Freud, the Oedipus complex is the unconscious attraction of a child to the parent of the opposite sex and the resulting competition or jealousy toward the parent of the same sex. While Oedipus himself never consciously experienced such feelings, his tragic fate perfectly reflects the essence of internal struggles and unconscious desires, which Freud argued are experienced by every person to some degree in early life. The story of Oedipus remains relevant today, as it not only reminds us of the power of fate and destiny, but also reveals the deeper aspects of human nature, the desire to avoid what is predestined, the fear of the unknown, and the psychological conflicts every person carries within themselves, often without realizing it. The fates of the heroes of ancient Greek myths teach us not only about valor and love, but also about the limits of human strength and the wisdom of knowing when to accept the law of fate. Bellerophon, despite all his victories, was punished for his pride and his desire to become equal to the gods. Orpheus, endowed with the power of music and the purity of heart, could not overcome doubt and fear, and his love, so great a treasure, was lost due to a momentary weakness. Oedipus, unfortunate and tragic, showed that even the wisest and most decisive actions of a person can serve as instruments of fate if it has been predetermined. These stories carry an eternal theme, the limits of human freedom. People can show courage, ingenuity, and love, but they remain part of a world governed by gods, fate, and the incomprehensible law of the universe. In the myths, a balance is traced between personal choice and predestination. A hero can be great, but his fate is not always under his control. Even the strongest feelings, honor, love, loyalty, cannot change the law that governs the world. However, alongside this, the myths convey hope and wisdom. Bellerophon teaches that cleverness and the aid of higher powers can overcome what seems impossible. Orpheus shows that the true power of the soul can reach even the hearts of the gods. Oedipus demonstrates that knowing the truth requires courage, though it often comes with the greatest pain. These lessons show that human greatness is not always in conquering others or monsters, but in the ability to accept the consequences of one's actions, find meaning, and continue living even when the world seems to crumble around us. Greek myths are like a mirror for humanity. They remind us that our lives are full of trials, sometimes tragic, sometimes joyous, but every encounter, every decision shapes us. A hero's feat is enough to inspire future generations, and his downfall teaches caution and humility. Love, strength, fate, these eternal themes continue to live in people's hearts, reminding us that to be human is to struggle, to suffer, and to strive toward light, even when darkness seems insurmountable. Thus, the journey through the myths ends not merely with tales of heroes, monsters, and gods. It transforms into a reflection on humanity itself, on its weaknesses, valor, passion, and love. Each of us is, in some sense, simultaneously Bellerophon, Orpheus, and Oedipus, performing feats, making mistakes, loving and losing, seeking meaning in a world full of chaos and beauty. And perhaps therein lies the eternal wisdom of myths. Despite pain, pride, fear, and tragedy, humans are capable of living, feeling, loving, and striving for what makes their soul great. Thus ends the journey through the great myths of ancient Greece, each story a thread in the tapestry of human experience. Bellerophon, once a hero who conquered impossible monsters, was humbled by pride, learning that even the mightiest deeds cannot elevate a mortal above the gods. Orpheus, whose music could move hearts and tame the dead, was tested by love and loss, showing that even the greatest devotion can be undone by doubt. Oedipus, caught in the inescapable web of fate, revealed that human freedom is fragile, and that attempts to outwit destiny can lead only to tragedy. Together, these myths reveal the delicate balance of human life, the courage to act, the wisdom to know one's limits, and the humility to accept forces beyond one's control. They teach that greatness lies not only in strength or cleverness, but in the ability to endure, to love, and to remain true to one's heart, even when the world turns harsh. Every victory and every loss carries meaning. Every love and every sorrow shapes the soul. In the end, the heroes' stories are mirrors for ourselves. We, too, face challenges that seem insurmountable, choices that carry weighty consequences, and moments of doubt that can undo our greatest hopes. But within these trials lies the potential for growth, understanding, and the timeless pursuit of wisdom and virtue. Myths endure because they speak to this eternal truth, that humanity's journey is filled with struggle, beauty, and fleeting triumphs, and that the measure of a person is not only in their deeds, but in how they confront life's joys, sorrows, and mysteries. As the legends fade into memory, their lessons remain. Bellerophon, Orpheus, and Oedipus remind us that courage, love, and humility are the truest marks of heroism. That fate and chance shape lives as surely as the gods themselves, and that even in the shadow of tragedy, the human spirit endures, seeking light, meaning, and connection in a world both wondrous and merciless. And so, the curtain falls on these timeless tales, leaving us with a quiet reverence for the fragile, brilliant, and heroic journey of life itself. Today, we have embarked on an amazing and profound journey through the mysterious and captivating world of ancient Greek myths. These ancient stories are much deeper than they may seem at first glance. They reflect our own dreams, fears, and hopes, helping us better understand ourselves and the world in which we live. Within the destinies of heroes and gods lie answers to many questions that have long fascinated humanity. Through all ages, Greek myths remind us of the importance of embracing and valuing our lives, with all their joys and tragedies. Now, I would like to turn to you. Which of the stories you heard today impressed you the most? And why? Share your thoughts in the comments. It will be fascinating to discuss together. Good night and sweet dreams.